the Dyatlov Pass incident. Lean in close, because this one has never been explained, not fully, not in a way that accounts for every detail simultaneously and leaves nothing remainder. Investigators have tried for 65 years. Scientists, journalists, criminologists, and 2 separate official Russian inquiries have each taken their turn at it. Each has emerged with a partial answer that explains some things and quietly ignores the rest. What happened on a mountain in the northern Ural range in February 1959 remains, in the precise technical sense of the word, unsolved. Part 1. The mountain. The northern Urals in winter are not a place that forgives mistakes. The range runs like a spine down the western edge of Siberia, and in February, the temperatures at altitude drop to -30, -40, sometimes lower. The wind comes without warning and without mercy. The snow is not the soft accumulating snow of lower latitudes. It is hard and granular and driven horizontal by winds that have crossed thousands of miles of open steppe with nothing to slow them down. The indigenous Mansi people who have lived in these mountains for centuries have a name for the particular peak at the center of this story. In their language, it translates, depending on the source, as either Dead Mountain or the Mountain of the Dead. They did not climb it. The 9 students who set out from Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg, in late January 1959 were not deterred by names. They were experienced hikers and ski tourers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, after whom the pass would eventually be named. The group ranged in age from 20 to 38. They were engineers, radio technicians, athletes, careful, prepared people who had done this before and understood what the mountain required of them. Their goal was to reach the summit of Otorten, a peak approximately 10 kilometers north of where they would ultimately stop. The journey was rated Category 3, the most difficult classification in Soviet hiking taxonomy. They knew what they were walking into. On the 1st of February 1959, they made camp on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. They were never seen alive again. Part 2. The tent. When the rescue team reached the campsite on the 26th of February, what they found was this. The tent was still standing. It had been cut open from the inside, not torn, not collapsed, but deliberately sliced through the fabric from within, as though the occupants had needed to exit faster than the entrance would allow. Personal belongings were inside: food, shoes, coats, the equipment of 9 people who had gone to sleep in a mountain camp and, at some point in the night, had abandoned it in such haste that they left behind the items most necessary for survival in -30-degree temperatures. They left in their socks. Some left barefoot. The tracks leading away from the tent moved downhill toward the tree line, approximately 1.5 kilometers below. The tracks were consistent with people walking, not running, though investigators noted that several sets suggested an unusual, wide-legged gait, as though the individuals were disoriented or impaired. The tracks reached the trees, and then, one by one, they stopped finding living people. Part 3. The bodies. The first 2 bodies were found at the tree line. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, both 21. They were barefoot, dressed only in underwear, beside the remnants of a small fire. The branches above them had been broken as high as 5 meters off the ground, suggesting one or both had climbed the tree, perhaps to look for something or toward something in the dark above the camp. Igor Dyatlov was found 300 meters further up the slope, facing back toward the tent. His posture suggested he had been trying to return. Zenaida Kolmogorova was found 500 meters from the tent, similarly oriented. Rustem Slobodin was found between them. All 3 had died of hypothermia. Slobodin had a small fracture in his skull. The remaining 4 were not found until May, when the snow melted enough to reveal them in a ravine 4 meters deep, some distance into the forest. They were more warmly dressed than the others, wearing items taken from the first victims, which meant they had survived long enough to do so. This detail is important. It means the group had, at some point after leaving the tent, divided. Some had died quickly, Others had lived longer, long enough to strip the dead for warmth, and had then gone deeper into the forest rather than back toward the camp. The 4 in the ravine had not died of hypothermia. Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles had massive skull fractures. Lyudmila Dubinova and Semyon Zolotaryov had severe chest trauma, broken ribs, fractured sternums, consistent, the medical examiner noted, with the force of a car crash or a significant pressure wave. The injuries were internal. There was almost no external bruising. Whatever had broken them had done so from the inside out, or with a force so sudden and so total that the tissue had no time to respond. Dubinova was missing her tongue. The official explanation for this last detail, offered quietly and without conviction, was post-mortem decomposition in the ravine's meltwater. Researchers have disputed this for 65 years. Part 4. The details that resist. The medical examiner who performed the autopsies noted that several of the bodies showed an unusual orange-brown discoloration of the skin. Investigators at the time attributed this to exposure. Some researchers have since suggested it is consistent with radiation exposure. When decades later, the clothing of several victims was tested, it returned elevated readings of radioactive contamination. The Soviet authorities offered no explanation for this. A group of hikers in the region around the same period reported seeing, on the night of February 1st to 2nd, glowing orange spheres moving through the sky above the northern Urals. This was not an isolated report. The Soviet military, when asked, acknowledged that test rockets had been launched in the region during this period. They did not elaborate. Igor Dyatlov had kept a meticulous group diary throughout the expedition. The final entry was dated February 1st. It was cheerful, routine. It described the weather and the day's progress and expressed satisfaction at having made good camp. There was nothing in it to suggest that 9 experienced mountaineers were, within hours, going to cut their way out of their tent and walk barefoot into a Siberian winter night. Nothing wrong, nothing unusual, and then whatever happened, happened. Part 5. The explanations. In 2019, the Russian government reopened the investigation and, in 2020, announced its conclusion. An avalanche. A slab of snow had broken loose above the tent, the investigators said, forcing the group to cut their way out and flee downhill. The chest injuries were consistent with avalanche compression. The tongue, decomposition, the radiation, old equipment and luminous watch dials, the glowing spheres, rocket tests, and the psychology of frightened witnesses. It is a coherent explanation. It does not explain why experienced mountaineers, caught in an avalanche on a slope they had assessed as safe, would walk 1.5 kilometers downhill in -30 temperatures without retrieving their boots. It does not explain why, if the tent had been buried and the group was in immediate danger, they did not dig it out once they reached the safety of the tree line. They had time, and they had the skills, and the equipment was there. It does not explain the specific pattern of injuries, which forensic analysts outside Russia have consistently noted are unusual for avalanche trauma. The 2020 report closed the case. Many who have studied it do not consider it closed. Part 6. The mountain. Kholat Syakhl is still there. The pass has been renamed in Dyatlov's honor. Hikers still climb it, thousands every year, drawn by the story as much as the terrain. A monument stands near the site of the camp, 9 figures rendered in metal, representing the hikers' desperate struggle against the mountain and the extreme conditions they encountered on the night of February 1st, 1959. The mountain does not offer anything in return. What drove 9 experienced, careful, well-equipped people out of a tent and into a Siberian night without their boots? Whether it was snow or sound or something the Soviet military preferred not to discuss, or something that has no entry in any official record, is a question the pass has absorbed into itself completely. The Mansi called it the Mountain of the Dead long before February 1959. They had their reasons. We just don't know if they were the same reasons as ours. Sleep well, my friend.